Welcome to the Streamlining Environmental Impact Assessment and Permits Compliance with GIS webinar. This is the fourth webinar in our Environmental and Natural Resources webinar series. I'm Megan Martinez, an industry marketing specialist here at Esri and Redlands, and I'll be their moderator today. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted next week. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording once it's available. Before we get started, I would like to encourage you to post your questions in the GoToWebinar questions dialog box throughout the presentation, and we will answer as many questions as time permits following the webinar. I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. We have Mike Bialish, a National Account Manager on the state government team here at Esri, and he is based out of our Philly office. And joining Mike is Matt Tarleton, a National Solutions Engineer on the state government team, and he's based out of Minneapolis. So now I'll hand it over to Mike.
Okay, thanks, Megan, and thanks everyone for participating today. We really appreciate this opportunity with you to discuss GIS in support of environmental impact assessments and permitting. A little bit more background about Matt and I, as we've mentioned in previous webinars. We're a team that works with environment and natural resources agencies in all 50 states, and so much of what we're going to share with you today comes from that experience. As Megan mentioned, this is actually the fourth in a series of webinars. In the first webinar, we started by looking at broader trends we're seeing across all the environment and natural resource agencies. So things like streamlining field operations, more effective monitoring of real-time information, enhancing constituent engagement, citizen science, documenting ROI, and so on. The second and third webinars were focused on more specifics relative to particular agency types and their key workflows. While today we're focusing on environmental impact assessment and permitting, which are of course key workflows in all the environmental agencies. The link at the bottom, which we will also send following today, has recordings of the first three webinars, and we'll also have a recording of today's webinar. Additionally, we welcome your feedback, and as I mentioned in other webinars, this actually resulted in us changing the topic for today given all the interest that was expressed. Even though this concludes this series of webinars, we do plan on having additional webinars in 2019, and these will be posted in the same place as well as through the GeoNet page shown at the link below on the slide. Okay, so as far as today goes, here are the topics that we're going to cover. We'll start out by discussing some of the key or major workflows that we're seeing where impact assessment and permitting is being implemented and some of the related challenges with that. Then, as we did in other webinars, we'll discuss the common patterns of use of the ArcGIS platform and how they relate to these major workflows and challenges. This will be followed by a quick overview of ArcGIS solutions, especially those that are related to today's topics, which will also include demonstrations from Matt. We'll try to leave about 10 minutes or so for questions at the end, and as a reminder, please enter your questions in the webinar chat box as we go along. Okay, so starting out with the key environmental and natural resources challenge and workflows related to today's topics. This is certainly not a complete list, rather some of the workflows that we see across natural resources agencies where GIS does and can play a significant supporting role and where environmental impact assessment and permitting are particularly involved. So starting with, of course, management and protection of natural resources, departments, of course, are challenged and often mandated with this responsibility, and GIS or location platforms and strategies play essential roles. This is largely accomplished through many initiatives and programs, whether it be ownership and management of land, such as state parks and state forests, to species, habitat, and ecosystem conservation, restoration, and management. Related to any of these charges, having all the critical information available in order to evaluate and set management and conservation strategies is critical. In addition, assessment of the potential impact of development and on-the-ground projects is vital, whether at the time of planning for them or actually applying for a permit when a project is imminent. Of course, regulatory agencies are especially responsible for the protection of land, air, and water resources, and often this is accomplished through permitting programs and related compliance. This includes not only knowing where critical facilities are, but having a means to regularly inspect these facilities against various compliances. A variety of environmental agencies are also involved with private lands coordination and stewardship, which is also critical to these workflows. Of course, there's many more beyond what we're showing here, but these are some of the workflows we see in every agency, every environmental agency, I should say, and ones where GIS is becoming critical to supporting them and where environmental impact assessments and permitting play vital roles. Whichever of these you look at, though, the challenges and goals behind them can be boiled down into things like enhanced decision making, in terms of having or using the right information in a timely manner to make better decisions. So whether this is for deciding whether a permit should be granted or modified, or tweaking environmental strategies and policies to better meet goals and protect resources, or even allocating resources for priority inspections. Internally to agencies, it's often about streamlining field operations as well as increasing overall operational awareness by things like leveraging authoritative information, whether you're in the field or in the office, and up through all levels of the departments, including executive staffs. And of course, it's about constituents in the community and increasing awareness and services to them, but also leveraging them as resources for things like data collection and feedback, and also ensuring that their voices are heard on things like proposed projects and the effectiveness of permit programs. Particular to these workflows, we also see some organizational challenges like inadequate staff resources and declining budgets and things like that, as well as the use of legacy systems, which play vital roles to these workflows, but can sometimes handcuff technology innovation. So GIS and location, as we see it, continues to support all these challenges, and I think we have some great examples to show you today. Before we do that, though, going back to previous webinars, another aspect we covered are the common patterns in which we see the ArcGIS platform being utilized, and this being a framework for implementation and for achieving maximum benefit of leveraging ArcGIS. There we go. So this certainly applies to environmental impact assessment and permitting, and what you're seeing on the screen are 9 common patterns of use providing that framework. So these are effectively business patterns of implementation and range from things like data management and visualization to field mobility and monitoring to analytics and analysis, design and decision support, engaging constituents, and of course sharing and collaboration. These are not only, the core benefits that the platform offers, but they also provide a really nice framework to assess business challenges and priorities, which in turn helps to define the appropriate technology solutions to address them. So this has become a very effective tool in helping departments with things like establishing short and long-term vision, as well as assessing business value and delivering on that. We consistently see environmental agencies across the country either setting up new implementations or taking a step back and looking at current implementations using this framework and planning for future growth and increased value return from leveraging the ArcGIS platform. We've worked with agencies generally within this context, but also to specific workflows involving things like efficient environmental impact assessment and permitting. So as we get into the deeper dive portion of this webinar, we'll identify these patterns of use relative to the implementations that we'll be illustrating. Okay, so now that I've gone through some of the main workflows and patterns of use, I'm just going to take a minute to talk about ArcGIS solutions, which are readily available to you and address many of the workflows I just discussed, and also leverage those patterns of use I just discussed in terms of how they're implemented. So as discussed in other webinars, solutions are configurations of platform components around core business processes and workflows. They leverage the COTS and configurable maps and apps of the platform and are simple to deploy and are supported just like our software is. When we develop these, they're developed in partnerships with organizations to define core business processes and workflows and then implement the platform to meet the various needs of them. We try to work to orient solution efforts on workflows that are repeatable, meaning with things like environmental impact assessment and permitting, that they have utility in whatever state that you might be working in across the country. Even though these are listed in buckets, so you can see on the screen, agriculture, natural resources, fish and wildlife, the solutions are configurable and extensible, so they can actually be utilized across other agencies that have similar challenges. As mentioned, these are easily deployable. In fact, you can deploy them directly to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise right from within ArcGIS Pro and configure them at the same time to meet your specific needs. As you can see, the solution configurations align with many of the workflows and patterns I discussed, and Matt will show you the ones for environmental impact assessment and permitting in just a minute. There's also a wealth of information from their home website, solutions.arcgis.com, and we encourage you very much to check that out. Okay, so now that we've set some context, let's take a deeper dive into the actual main topics for today. So starting with environmental impact assessment, there are many ways, of course, that GIS can support these kinds of efforts. The environmental impact solutions that are available, which you can see screenshots of on the screen, are a series of integrated maps and apps that support the identification of potential impacts for really any planned or proposed activity on the ground, or even for things like evaluating potential private land easements. Using configurable tools like Web App Builder, Story Maps, other web-based templates, and even ArcGIS Pro, the solutions support basic and detailed analysis of potential impacts, or simply assessments of natural resources in and around specified areas. They also allow for the effective communication of this information to project stakeholders and the public, as well as soliciting feedback from them. These are all extremely critical elements to environmental impact studies, no matter at what level or what scale that you might be working at. So taking a closer look, here we go. These solutions allow for the evaluation of potential implications of proposed activities, and doing this in an iterative way using a web-based screening tool. Project information from that screening tool can be summarized and then brought into a more detailed analysis workflow for further evaluation. All the while you're doing this, you're ensuring that this evaluation is being done using authoritative information for the resources being analyzed, and that the same information and results can be conveyed to stakeholders in the public, and their feedback can be captured actually in the same place. So we're certainly not claiming with these, I don't want to misconstrue anything here, we're certainly not claiming that these tools do everything that is required for many of these processes, but they have the potential to support much of the required workflow, and also to be complementary to more advanced tools with well-defined workflows and steps, such as like NatureServe's environmental review tool. Overall, these environmental impact assessment solutions are some of our most popular solutions being utilized, especially in the environmental space, of course. And the web-based environmental screening piece that I mentioned earlier, and that I'm showing on the screen, is especially popular. Even though the solutions, as I mentioned, are integrated with each other, they can actually be used independently, and we see the screening tool being used in a multitude of workflows, where screening, of course, plays a role. So such as not only evaluating proposed projects, but also things like considering private lands for easements, like I mentioned before, or evaluation of overall management strategies. The screening tool itself can be configured to evaluate really any resources, and even has the capability to print results in a standardized and configurable printed or PDF report, which Matt will show you in just a minute. All right, so now if we take a quick step back from this and think about environmental impact assessments, this workflow is being used really to help make better decisions, as I'm sure we all know. In the case of proposed on-the-ground activities, this consists of initial evaluations to more detailed analysis, to communicating out these results, to obtaining feedback from those you're communicating with relative to these activities. So often the communication and feedback leads to the need for further analysis or more alternatives, and then the cycle starts over again. So what we've tried to do is wrap the solutions around each of these key elements of this workflow with the goal of increasing insight and clarity throughout these workflow steps. Another way to look at this is what's typically done and required by the NEPA process, or the National Environmental Policy Act. So whether you're doing a categorical exclusion, an environmental assessment, or EA, or a full environmental impact statement, or EIS, these workflows involve the elements I just discussed in terms of evaluation, analysis, and two-way communication with stakeholders. The solutions we have in place, of course, can support many facets of these elements. And as I'm sure you've gleaned, they can help you to implement several of the common patterns of use relative to this workflow. So from mapping and visualization to decision support to sharing and communication. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Matt, and he's going to take you through a demonstration of these environmental impact solutions. So Matt, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Mike, and you should be able to see my screen now. And I'm going to start with the ArcGIS solution site. So everything I'm going to show today can be downloaded and then configured in your organization through this ArcGIS online solution site. And this is solutions.arcgis.com. So if you go down to state government, we have different types of solution sets. And the ones I'll be showing today are natural resource, that is monitor permit status, and then analyze environmental impact. So these are the two solution sets I'll be showing. They're freely available to anyone that has ArcGIS platform to come in and download them, and then they configure them for your application. But you go here to get them, you download them, and then put them in your organization, and away you go. So the first set I'm going to show is the environmental screening set of solutions. And Mike alluded to earlier that there's really 4 parts of this workflow we cover. That is the analysis, the detailed analysis, overall analysis, supporting public feedback, supporting engagement, and then sharing your findings. And so I really wanted to kind of highlight how all of these work. And first I'm going to start with this just generic environmental screening tool. And I say generic not as a bad thing. This is a JavaScript application. It runs in the web app builder backbone, but this is by far one of the most popular applications we've come across. A lot of people don't realize it even exists, and then when I demonstrate how it works and what it can be used for, you can kind of see the light bulbs going off. But this environmental screening tool is very powerful, and it's designed so that someone who, without even a lot of GIS knowledge, can kind of come in and use it and get information out. I'll show this first, then I'll take a step back and show ArcGIS Pro and how a lot of this analysis is actually done. But first, I just kind of wanted to show what a web application could do for your agency. So here we have demonstration data from the state of Maryland. And in this particular example, I'm going to demonstrate the impacts that building and rehabilitating a new bridge, either building a new bridge or rehabilitating an existing bridge would do in terms of environmental impacts and how you can start to analyze that. So you open up this tool, it gives you your default extent, and you can see immediately over here on the right, there's different abilities to enter in spatial information. So you can enter in a place name, that is search for an address or a location. You can draw in your site, or if you have shape files or coordinates of the site you'll be working on, you can simply import them and then buffer around it and then start your report from that. In this particular case, I'm just going to draw a line that's going to represent a bridge that we want to go ahead and rehabilitate. So I'll draw my bridge here across this waterway. So draw with my line, and then I can go ahead and draw and buffer. And just to make sure I get enough information in here, I'll do 4 miles, which is probably a little bit excessive, but we'll hit the report button anyway. And now what it is doing is it is building a 4-mile buffer around this line that I drew, and in it capturing all the critical information that we have as GIS layers. And these layers are feature layers that are served up with the application. They're completely configurable. In this example, we have things like artificial reef sites, spawning sites, bird nest sites. But these layers can be anything that you want. You can take them out, add new ones, whatever you want. You can make this application yours. And so in this particular example, it's grabbing against the attribute information of these. You can see here for artificial reef sites, we have the Severn River and the Asquith Reef. Both of these are right here. We have some fish spawning sites, and you can go through and you kind of can get all the information in here. Now, what's nice about this application is that you're just drilling through the attribute information of all these different layers, but you can go up here to this print button. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to print in PDF. And so this PDF, again, is configurable. Just this portion many agencies have been using just to generate configurable PDF reports. But what will happen is it goes through, and all these different layers that you have within this tool are being searched against and then put here. Again, configurable. You can do what you want. It generates the time that you did this, and at the top, it gives you that PDF map and the legend of the information that you're looking at. And again, here I just kind of drew a line freehand, and it's in here. But whatever information you put in will be in this report. You can configure it, and then you can go up here and print it, save it as a PDF. But it's designed so that someone who, again, doesn't really understand how to use all the complex tools that are being utilized within this GIS application to come in, put the information in, to get the information out, and then they have a report that they can then pass out to those involved or save for later use. Now, of course, this is in and of itself is very useful, but a lot of our users are super users and are really interested in really digging in deep to how this analysis is done and tweaking that. So along with that web application, we have another set of project files for ArcGIS Pro where you can go in and you can actually fine-tune the analysis. So again, I have another bridge that we're going to rehabilitate. In ArcGIS Pro, I have the same dummy data set in here from Maryland for demonstration purposes. But you can go in here, everything works. But what also comes with this tool, I want to bring over my catalog window here, is some different toolboxes. So the environmental analysis toolbox, we have analysis tools, things like basic proximity, distance, and then the feature comparison. These are Python scripts that our team has written and put together in a toolbox. And these are the actual tools that are being used in that web application I just showed to generate the information. And so these tools you can use use in other workflows, edit as you see fit, and of course the reporting tool. So the actual generating of that PDF report is here in the impact report script. So you can go in and you can reconfigure how you want to, your end reports to look and everything like that. So these tools are really handy, and again, you can download them, put them in ArcGIS Pro, and use them with existing workflows. But we also included some models in here, and so I really actually like these models. One of them in particular, the second one, is pretty complex. And so if you actually want to see how this information works, this is what, in one stage, what that web application is doing. This is how it's actually generating the feature class from a report, or a report from a feature class, rather. If you go through here, there's different ones to do the different workflows. And this one in particular represents exactly what that tool is doing. So all of these blue inputs here represent your different feature layers. Again, they can be configured, and then you can reconfigure this tool to, or this model rather, to do what you want and spit out the eventual end report. And so to change up the actual layers you use, you can just go into these inputs, edit them as you see fit. We have agencies that are, doubled this list and have an absolutely massive model. We have some agencies that are just using a couple inputs to generate the reports, are really critical ones. But you can kind of take this kind of skeleton and build it out the way you see fit, dig through all the attribute information of all these different layers, and you end up with this, relatively easy to use but very powerful analysis tool that will take apart and pull apart a whole bunch of different data sets and kind of build them into one thing that's very useful. In terms of what these reports can actually look like, a lot of the questions I get is, well, what can actually change in these reports? And the answer is pretty much all of it. If you're willing to go in and you're willing to tweak the tool or go into the code and kind of reconfigure things. This is an example of one that's more heavy on the attribute information. And so this is kind of pulling out the entire attribute table of this data set. In this case, we have different pine trees, a tree survey, and tree measurements. And so, a pretty robust report that this is generated along with that. Or the bridge project that I just shown in ArcGIS Pro, this is what that report looks like if I'm using the default configuration. And this one's a little bit more, not really tidied up, but it has more of the aggregated information on it. And it's not just a complete data dump of the attribute tables, but it has some extra steps in here where you're getting, total lengths shown here. It's not just, data dumping out the attribute tables, you're getting kind of aggregated information as well. So both of these workflows are supported, and again, the reason we've done this is that we have some users that I know are very comfortable in desktop GIS and want to get in and want to get their hands dirty with the analysis. We have tools for that, but we have a lot of other agencies that have a lot of users that are part of the permitting process and the impact process, but they're not GIS super users, and so having that GIS super user to set up a web application, serve it out in ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS, and then your users kind of come in, hit that app, and get everything they need out. Kind of removes the need for that GIS user to do the same report over and over and over again. So along with these two parts, the analysis and kind of the screening aspect, the other parts of working with these projects is soliciting public impact or public feedback. And so I wanted to take this just part of the workflow out and highlight it by itself. In this particular example here, we have the environmental impact public comment application, and this is again another web application. But we have three proposed projects, so you can select on them. Again, this is just demonstration data, so there's not a lot of true information in here. It's just for demonstration purposes only. But you can kind of get a sense of what you can do with these applications. And so it's all about the agency, public hearings. If you want to get feedback, people can vote. They can go in. Again, you can configure this. They can leave information. So if someone wants to get contacted or you get feedback that you want to follow up on, you can do that easily in here. And so in this example, we have three different projects that have been proposed. Again, showing the same area, showing the map, showing the information, and then you can go in, leave a comment if you so desired, or you can go in and vote. And these are all dynamic. So you notice I had 45 here. I have 43 here. I can go in and I can get rid of this vote and it will change. 21 here, it should change to 22. These are live, and you can kind of solicit feedback that way. And so this is an easy way for you to just pass out a web URL. People can come, they can leave feedback, and it's easy for your agency to then, get that feedback, and it's a two-way street. You can use this to solicit feedback, but also give feedback to people. Now, this is great, and this is, a place where people can go, but where I think this whole entire process really shines is through a story map. And what I like about the story map example is that the story map is basically a blank canvas. You can kind of put in whatever you want. And so in this particular example, again, I'm using that railroad rehabilitation project. So I have my map here to start. As I scroll through, I have more information about the project description. I have some map extent in here saved. So you can see here's your proximity to Baltimore, the project location. You can go through some of the populated places. Again, you can click buttons and it will open up another ArcGIS Online or other web hosted data sets you have, so people can kind of get a sense. But what I really like about this one is that you can go through, and the provide feedback application that I have just shown is actually part of the story map. So you can weave these things together. Again, the same application is now part of that story map experience, and so you can lump these together. I don't want to give the impression that someone is just going to do something in Pro and then it's done. We really design these solutions so that they work in tandem with one another, so that as you build these pieces, you can put them together. And in this case, in the story map, you can solicit feedback straight through the story map, which again is pretty handy. And so the other one I wanted to talk about was just a little bit about the assessment summary. This is again coming from that first tool I showed, kind of the aggregate overview of the areas that are impacted. In this case, you have one bird nesting site, and the different acres of protected area and things like that. And of course, you can also link to reports about the bridge in question and things like that. And so I just wanted to highlight how these solutions can be used to kind of fill in the major parts of this workflow. As Mike said, they're not a perfect fit for every organization, but it lets people get most of the way there. And then you can kind of use your special tools or specialized tools on top of what you have here, so you can spend your time on those as opposed to reinventing the wheel. So this environmental impact analysis, like I said, it's by far one of the most popular applications. Especially the reporting aspect of this has been extremely popular, and it's a very powerful set of solutions, and not a lot of our users seem to know about them. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike, and he's going to now talk about the permitting solution and go from there.
All right, thanks, Matt, and great job on that. That was really good. Okay, so like Matt just said, we're going to now transition over to solutions that directly support the permitting process. But as we go into that, hopefully you can also see how the solutions Matt just illustrated and we both described, how they also support aspects of permitting. right? So especially where potential impact studies need to be done, and also the stakeholder engagement side, like Matt was just showing with the story maps and the public input, combining those together and that sorts of thing. Really, those things can support the permitting process as well. But the set of solutions that we're going to discuss now really are available to that in such a way that they can help to streamline and bring operational awareness to the permit process itself. So especially as permits move through their workflow, so from the initial application of the permit to reviews, inspections, and approvals. So the solutions are geared towards these components. So similar to what I described with environmental impact assessment, where the key components of the workflow, we tried to layer solutions in with those key components. Did the same thing here. And so what the solutions do more specifically is allow for efficient review and inspection of permit areas, as well as monitoring the progress of individual permits and how permit programs are doing as a whole. So in addition, any related compliance type issues can be tracked and monitored with these, and all of this information can be shared through dashboards and web mapping applications, both internally and externally. Effectively, what the solutions are doing then are helping to define, or can help to define, a geospatial-based strategy to support and streamline the permit process. So Matt, go ahead and flip to the next slide. All right, so there we go. So if we take a closer look at the solutions themselves, they include, just like before, configurable maps and apps, in this case to perform field inspections and surveys through ArcGIS Online and Collector for ArcGIS. Also monitoring all this information and tracking progress relative to goals through Operations Dashboard, and then managing and sharing permit and inspection information through a web app builder application. These are all configurable, of course, and can also be integrated alongside or within existing permitting systems. The approach with these solutions supports several common patterns of use, as you can see, and can help to expedite the permit process, whether it's with the short turnarounds that's often required with just general permits, or more complex permit processes involved with things like new road alignments, or things like activities that involve groundwater discharge, mining activities, and so on. By leveraging location and GIS as a primary medium, along with these user-friendly configurable tools, the permit process can be streamlined, and at the same time provide a lot more operational awareness across departments, as well as to stakeholders and the public and so on. And so with that, Matt, if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it back over to you now to demo the solutions, and go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Mike. So the permit status ones are a little bit smaller than the impact assessment I just did. There's basically, two web applications, but what's really powerful about this set of solutions is the field mobility part. That is, the part that supports users going out into the field and collecting information. And so as you deploy this permitting workflow, the first thing you'll get is a collector for ArcGIS deployment. And so this is the deployment as it sits. Again, we're using demonstration data from the state of Maryland. But you go over here on the left and you see there's all these different types of permits. These permits come from the feature layer that's imported here, and the source of that can be, a shapefile. It can be information that comes out of your permitting system. However you get that information in, as long as it's in a GIS compatible format, you can then feed it to collector and away you go. And so in this particular one, I'm using the default configuration. So you can see there's all these different types of permits. And so if I want to do, say, a mining permit, I can select that and it will open up the information. And so in this particular one, I haven't done much in terms of feeding information. You could set it so that it will feed the permit ID in. Again, I've selected mining, the name, dates, everything is all in here. But what's also in here is, it's nice, is that you can set domains so that when the person's out in the field, they can go ahead and they have that drop-down menu to make things easier. So this could be a reinspection. And so all of these different attributes come included with the deployment for collector, but they're also configurable. So, you don't have to put everything in here. If there's something you need that's not included, it's easy to redo the fields in ArcGIS Pro and kind of reauthor it. And so at the very least, we tried to get a lot of the common attributes that we know different agencies collect across multiple states. It's not going to be perfect, but again, it's designed to get our users most of the way there, and you can kind of fine tune what you need. So this collector information is really the kind of the backbone of how all this permitting workflow works. Of course, you have attachments, you have the ability to add files in addition. But what I really like about this one is not just how this works to do the first time around, but you can go in, you can select an information. So I'll select a permit here. I can go down and I can do inspection history. And so along with this collector for ArcGIS deployment is not just all the permits. It includes hooks for a related table where you can go in and you can do an inspection of an existing permit. You can set it up so it'll automatically feed in the permit ID, but you can go in and you can add information to an existing permit that will go into a separate related table that you can then query against. And so this collector for ArcGIS deployment really includes two separate workflows. One, starting at the beginning for establishing a new site, or you can go back in and you can select an existing permit, and then from there, go in and edit the attributes and add in another inspection to that permit that already exists, and then feed it to a separate table. So again, what we try to do here is support a multitude of workflows where the field user just has the one application they're going to use, regardless of if they're going to put in a new permit or if they're going to follow up with an existing permit. The idea was that as you're in the field, as you're doing things, if you're at one site and you have to do multiple permits in the same area, it's easy to add new ones and edit attributes of existing ones in the form of a related table, basically to make it as easy for the field user as possible. So that's kind of the backbone of this workflow, but once the field users have that information in ArcGIS, the next part is to kind of take a look at how this information is coming in and what's going on. And so this is a configuration of an operations dashboard, and so you can see the same data set, slightly different symbology. But this dashboard has been configured to show the number of permits that have been completed and also the ones that are outstanding between 30 and 60 days. And again, this is completely configurable to whatever your agency needs or finds important. And so we have some agencies, that have changed these numbers to 90 days. We have one that, some that I've removed the list up here. But it's kind of a great situational overview. So if you have an executive, if you have someone that just kind of wants to go to a website and just kind of see what's been going on in the field, this is a very easy way for them to do that. And again, as soon as that field worker is done editing information, click send, and they're connected to the internet or to Wi-Fi or to a cell connection, the information in here will automatically change, the widgets will automatically change, and so you can go in and kind of see, the permit status. And here on the bottom, it's the tabs. There's also a permit expiration. And so on the flip side, if you're interested to see how many permits are about to expire within the next 30 days or up to 30 to 60 days, you can do that. You can click on the information, you can configure it so it will zoom in and do the pop-ups, things like that. And so this dashboard is a great situational awareness kind of viewer and a situational overview viewer for an entire agency. And it's great for, if you have an executive or a manager that's really interested just to see where things are at and ask frequently for it. You can put this dashboard up, they can hit this dashboard, they can get the information. And like I said, as information comes in, it automatically updates. You're seeing the most up-to-date as soon as something is committed to the database. Now, the other side of the permit story is not just collecting the permit information, but in some cases sharing the permit information to the outside world. And so there's also a web app builder application here that just kind of shows the overview of permits. And this is an application that was designed to be public facing so that someone could come in, if they know their permit number, they can go up here, they can search it, or they can simply collect click on a point and get the information. And so you can, of course, zoom to the point. And if you're interested about viewing the information, you can go through and you can look in the attribute table. And again, you can even control what fields are being served out in the attribute table. You have complete control over what is seen here. But along with just the permit itself, I talked earlier about that related table and the history. You can select the history information. You can get that information and you can see, I'll go ahead and open this in the attribute table as well. As users have gone through and appended in more recent inspections or other inspections of the site, you can see that as well, all in the same application. And this is really handy for people who have to share information to the public. You can go through, you can configure how you want this attribute table to look. But it's an easy way for people to kind of just hit one website. They can see the map, they can see the information, they can search both by location, address location, and by permit number, and then they can get the information they need, and then away they go. So these applications were designed, again, not to be the magic silver bullet that will take care of everything, but get agencies most of the way there. And then once you're done with that, kind of retweaking the workflow to make sure that it covers the information. And so, again, I wanted to reiterate, the question we get asked over and over again is, most agencies aren't starting from scratch with permitting resources. They're starting with an often vast number of permits that they already have in a permitting database or something like that. And so if you can get that information out in a way that any of our ArcGIS software can consume, you can feed it into these applications and start there. So it's not being done completely in a vacuum. You can hook it up to existing data, feed that existing data into these workflows, and away you go. And so I just wanted to make sure that people understood that point. So going back to the PowerPoint, I also wanted to reiterate that, I showed collector here, but really these workflows are designed to work in an entire kind of suite of applications for field data collection. And so, here we have the planning aspect and both in permitting and going back to that environmental impact assessment. You can plan, you can do your analysis in either desktop GIS or ArcGIS Online. Once you have your plan in play, you can organize your workforce or ArcGIS. You can assign people permits to go out and take a look at. They can use Navigator to get to the point and then go and actually collect in Collector for ArcGIS or Survey 123 for ArcGIS. And so the deployment I had here is using Collector for the permitting side. I'm finding that a lot of people are using Collector to collect the information, but Survey 123 also works the same way, has some more robust capabilities in there to collect some more complex information about the permit. So now with that, I wanted to remind everyone that this is number 4 of our 4-part webinar series. The webinars are being recorded. They're going to be available both online and on the Natural Resource Home here. And now Mike and I are happy to take questions. We have about 18 minutes or so for questions. So we're happy to take any that you might have, and I thank you guys for your time.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, we have some questions coming in, so we can get started. The first one we have is, what is the process for integrating your own agency data into the screening app? What data types are importable?
So basically, any data that you can currently consume within ArcGIS is fair game. So if you have shape files, if you have feature classes, if you have a layer that you need to convert over from like an Excel document or something, that's all it takes. If you can use it in ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, you can then serve it up to the rest of these tools and use them there.
Yeah, and just to add to that too, there's a lot of data that's available as services now, of course. Things like there's the curated sets of data that are in the Living Atlas of the World that Esri provides, as part of ArcGIS, and there's several data sets in there that would be probably applicable to many environmental impact assessments. And then, of course, there's plenty of services that are available, from other federal, states, other agencies and organization types too that could potentially be utilized.
Okay, great, thank you. And The next question is, how is the data collected for this environmental analysis? For instance, the fish spawning sites is highly localized. How is that obtained?
So a lot of these data sets we envision would be collected by people who are out in the field that collect a point or collect a polygon area of that critical site. And so in terms of how these applications work, it doesn't matter if it's a point or a polygon or a line. But however you want to collect that information, that's a conversation that Mike and I are happy to have. But basically, if you collect it in any format that you can, feed in ArcGIS, it would work for them. In this particular case, we envision it as someone who would be out, in the field surveying, and they find a bird nesting site or something, and they just drop a point of where that site is located, and then that's the data set that's used.
Yep. So yeah, it kind of goes back to the last question too, right? As far as what data is available, for the tools. And so yeah, as long as it's available and collected into those, data sets that are made available to the tool, you can leverage them within there. Since the person particularly mentioned fish spawning sites, I may have missed it, Matt, if you mentioned that the data that's used in the application that you were showing is simply sample data.
Yeah.
So just FYI, but it's to give you an example of how it could work, by leveraging available data sources. So
yep,
just wanted to mention that.
Okay, and the next question is, the environmental impact assessment tool only available for certain geographies?
It is not. You can use it wherever you want. The tool itself is totally agnostic to the location you want to use it at. You just put in your information, and then you go to the default extent you want and save it, and that will work. In this example here, we use Maryland, but no, it will work for whatever spatial data you want to feed it, big or small. I would say that if you use it over a really wide area, it can kind of be a lot if you have a really dense data set. But other than that, no, you can use it wherever you want.
Yep.
Okay. And next question, if I have 110 shapefiles throughout my state, can I run the environmental screening for all the sites at the same time?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have not tried that many shapefiles, and so that's something that we might want to follow up with offline. You can run multiple shapefiles, and I've done a couple of them, but I have not fed it that many. So a skill question I can't really answer, but I'm happy to test it with you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors in play there. How big are the data, how big are the shape files, how many features they contain, that kind of thing. It would come down to performance issues or challenges, with those. So it would just require some testing. But theoretically, there's not really a limit per se. But obviously there's limits to everything. So just there's a lot of factors, and we just have to test it out. But theoretically, it should be able to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the next question, how do you use related tables to create auto-populating collector fields?
So there's a way where you can pull data from existing sources back and forth, and it works from survey 123 to collector. It does not work currently for collector back to survey 123, but you can set that up to pull the information through, and I'm happy to help you with that if you want to follow up offline.
Yep.
Okay, and next question, the data sets in the environmental analysis impact apps are empty shells or already contain records?
They'll just be empty shells, and you're going to have to point them to the data set you want to use. And so in this example, I pulled all of our demonstration dummy data down with it. But the tools are just like any other tools you use in ArcGIS Pro. You're going to have to specify, which layer you want to use them against, and then in some cases, you're going to have to give them some feedback. In terms of the distance one, you just tell it, what points or what polygons you want, and it will give you the distance. You don't have to really specify much more than that.
So yeah, this really gets to, the configurable portion, of these tools, and being able to, we give you sort of the model application to go on, and then it's based on your own requirements, what data you have available, what you want to screen against or do an impact assessment against or whatever. You then tell it, these are the data sets that I want to do that with. And so we give you, like Matt just said, we give you that shell, and then you fill it in with the appropriate data sets for your particular workflow and process.
Okay. And the next question is, how can this suite of apps be used in a secure cyberspace such as used by the DoD, where users cannot upload to the cloud but can only upload data by plugging in hardware to a secure computer system?
So that gets to be a little bit more tricky. In this case, you'd have to host everything through Portal for ArcGIS, and then as the users come back, they'd have to upload the data that way, manually. And then once the data is into the database, it would work the same way. But there's ways where you can deploy it behind a firewall using your own infrastructure. That would be through Portal for ArcGIS. And so it would behave the same way. It's just that the user that's out in the field, that data is not going to show up in your system until they come in and plug that data in and actually upload it. Whereas in a non-classified or open setting where someone's just out having a device that's connected to cell reception, as soon as they click send, it will use that cell reception to send that information up to the cloud and save it. So the workflow would work virtually the same. It's just you have to get that data physically into the system first.
Yeah, and there's, just to add to that, there's a wide variety of options and architectures and configurations and all that kind of stuff. So that's something that would probably be best discussed offline, that kind of thing, and really taking a look at requirements, what infrastructure is available or possible, and going about it that way. So, but wide variety of ways to address, security type issues. And it's something, we work, especially with environmental agencies, whether it's, sensitive, species information or habitat information. Sometimes there's personally identifiable information involved, things like that. So there's a lot of security considerations, and that's something that we work very regularly with agencies on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and can you use feature services for these applications?
Yep, you sure can.
Yep.
Okay, that was a quick one. And let's see. Where is the EIA tool currently being utilized by agencies? Is there a list somewhere? Can you give more of a sense of market penetration?
Well, I'll defer that one to Mike.
Yeah, I figured you would. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have like a list that I can just shoot out, but we, like we said, particularly the environmental impact assessment, they're some of our most popular solutions. I think Matt said that as well. And so we see them being used kind of straight up for environmental screening and environmental impact assessment like we talked about. But we also see, and I think I mentioned this a little bit too, we also see them being reconfigured and used for really any process that needs to take a look at natural resources in a given area or around a given area, like within a buffer area, things like that. And so the penetration is pretty deep actually within the environmental agencies, and not just for, what you typically think of for screening, hey, I've got a proposed project or a new development, or, there's a new management strategy or development plan that's being put in place. Let's do some screening. We're actually seeing it being tied to a lot of different processes where any kind of spatial analysis like that needs to be done. We're seeing the screening tools and the ArcGIS Pro tools that Matt mentions, being reconfigured and attached to other workflows where you need to do that spatial overlay and take a look at what's within a given area or around a given area. So it's something, I mean, whoever asked that question, if you want specific examples, we definitely have quite a few of them, and ones actually we can share, some of the outputs from, and things like that. We've gotten permission, from customers to do that. And then, of course, on the communication and feedback side, we see that quite a bit too, particularly the story map template like Matt was showing, and conveying out information relative to environmental impacts or potential environmental impacts, via story map as a medium. And we see that across a lot of different program areas as well. So I know that was kind of a vague answer, but we could certainly follow up with anyone who would be interested in showing some examples.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and a couple questions coming in regarding accessing these tools. One is, where are the screening tool for Web App Builder and the environmental analysis toolbox located for download, and are they free?
So they're both available on the solutions at arcgis.com page. You go to them and you just click download, and it will open up a page and it'll let you download them. And yes, everything I've shown today, with the exception of Collector, is free if you have access to ArcGIS software. And so if you have access to ArcGIS Online, if you have a named user, you can get access to that. Collector obviously requires the named user, which kind of gets into another discussion. But these are all available at no extra cost. If as part of your maintenance, you get entitlements for named users, and with that comes access to all of these solutions for free.
Yep, and so just to add a little bit to that too, since downloading was brought up, that's certainly a deployment pattern, configuration and deployment pattern, I should say. But I think I briefly mentioned too, there is a deployment tool directly within ArcGIS Pro as well. Yep. Yeah, that you can just basically, you go in there, you go into the deployment tool, and it actually lists out all the solutions, and from there you can directly deploy them to ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS within ArcGIS Enterprise, and go from there. And you can actually configure them at the same time for your own needs, and all that kind of stuff. Yep. So I did want to mention that there are kind of two deployment patterns, depending upon your needs and what you want to configure or extend or even potentially customize, with the solutions. But yeah, everything from solutions.arcgis.com.
And if you need help with something like that or the configuration stuff, I'm happy to help with that too. I've done it many times now, and so I'm happy to help if you need help with it.
Okay, and we probably have time for a couple more questions. And if we don't get to yours, we'll follow up directly afterwards. Yep. The next one is, can you configure Collector to collect GPS metadata?
Yes, you can. It's a little bit of a process, but yes, you can do that. And if you're really interested in getting like the survey grade stuff, you can do averaging on an iPad, or you can use an outside Bluetooth-enabled unit to collect survey grade information that will then be fed into Collector. But yes, it will collect the metadata along with it if you're curious as to the error size of your data.
Yep. Okay, and what is your opinion on using query layer services within some of these solutions?
Ooh, that is a good question. I guess I'll have to answer that question with another question. It depends really on the workflow you have in mind. It could work. I would also be curious to see how you would use it and why you want to use it, and make sure that would be the right fit, which I know is a generic answer, but in a lot of these cases, and in so much of GIS, there's multiple ways to get to the same place, and so I just want to make sure that that would be the most efficient way to get there. But yes, it should work. I'm just not sure if it's the most efficient way to make something work.
Agreed.
Okay, and you have mentioned workflows for natural resources. Can one reconfigure this suite of applications for cultural resource management? Has anyone done that?
Yes, you can. Off the top of my head, no. But there's, it's kind of another theme in GIS that there's all these tools out there that were envisioned for one set of workflows that you could repurpose. And so if you have a lot of data that you want to mine through and you want to pull the attribute information of, it doesn't matter if that's environmental data or cultural data or, drug manufacturers, if you're doing some sort of health, workflow, whatever spatial data you feed it, it will work against, and it will behave the same way. You just have to make sure it's, a spatially enabled data set.
Yeah, and it's something we're starting to see. We're getting that question a little bit more now. As folks or as agencies modernize and things like that, cultural resources is starting to come up a lot more. And in fairness, some of the processes, particularly impact assessment, the process itself is very similar, just using different data. Now, some of the outputs and reporting and things are different, but I mean, just that actual process of doing that impact assessment. And so the possibility is certainly there. I can't say I know of anybody who's done that with these particular solutions that we showed today, but there's no reason that it can't be done. It's like I mentioned in the beginning, you can take these solutions, even though they're under particular buckets, and reconfigure them and deploy them for workflows and other agency types. That's part of their benefit. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. If we did not get to your question, we will follow up with you directly. Thank you all for attending, and there will be a short survey that will pop up on your screen right after the webinar ends. We would greatly appreciate your feedback, and we will use your suggestions when designing those future webinars. So thank you again for your time, and we will send you an email with a link to the recording next week. Have a good day. Thank you.